But now let's talk with Terry Hershey.
Hey guys.
Hi.
It's good to see you.
Terry, when I think about what gets in the way of community for people, I know there are so many people who say, I would love to have an authentic experience of community, even a faith community, but what gets in the way is this tyranny of busyness. And much of the busyness in the community where I live, in the suburbs of Chicago, has to do with children being on sports teams, and that prevents them from even getting to church on Sunday.
I know.
How do you speak to that?
Oh, well, at one level, though, people recognize it. I mean, we recognize that it's out of whack, you know. We're out of breath and out of time, and we know that something is off. But here's where we get in trouble, when we assume that we can take care of it by adding more to it. You know, so we say, okay, I can be more authentic and be real if I have more time with you, but I need to balance my life. So we tell them to go buy a book on balancing their life. In other words, we add more to their life, or buy some new technology tool. So we've exacerbated the problem with the problem. And the first step is just someone willing to say, I can't do this. I can't live this way anymore. And the part of the problem is the permission to say, this isn't working for me, which is a way of being real, which is where community starts. Because if I'm willing to say, this isn't working for me, I need another way to do this, then maybe you will say, you know what, I understand. And just in that exchange, we now have community, because we have some place of vulnerability.
I'm so glad we're talking about this idea of community, because I'm fascinated by it on a couple of levels. I think people are drawn to faith communities for one thing, and then there's a separation sometimes about the personal relationship that they have with God. How do those two things kind of play off of each other? Because my experience has been, when I'm a part of a vital faith community, it feeds the other personal piece. But to have just one or the other, it seems less full in a way. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely do agree with that. And part of my own faith journey is spending time with my spiritual director, who's a Benedictine. And so I've spent a lot of time at a monastery with him. And of course, the Benedictines would say that whenever you greet someone, you greet Christ. And so what was ingrained in me, which is the assumption that I really cannot have that one-on-one with God unless I see God in the face of those people around me. So I can't really differentiate it. And in our culture, what we've done this sort of, at least, you know, from the Christian church, what we've done is sort of this me and Jesus mentality, you know. But it's impossible. There's no such thing. It's impossible.
In some ways, it's exacerbated by the very thing we're doing here, which is a religious television show. But there is a phenomenon, of course, in America of people who are distanced from real-life faith communities and have this very personal relationship with God through only the media or the radio. What effect does that have on folks?
That's a great question. I mean, because it's the same with technology, too, because all of the way we do email and or Facebook and or all of those other things is I can have my community, but it's a pseudo-community. And I know a lot of churches are even toying with that, where they're actually doing worship services online. You know, they're all by video or whatever it's called. That stuff is way beyond me. I was born in the wrong century. But I think, personally, I think it takes a toll. I mean, Phyllis Tickle and I have talked about this, and you know, Phyllis says, no, you need to let people find community where they can, because just because it's not the way I believe it should happen doesn't mean it's not at some level real. But at some place, sometime, there still has to be skin. That's all Jesus and skin. There has to be something skin to it.
And even some skin to a person that you disagree with. I loved your point about in community, you're forced to sit next to somebody in the pew who you might disagree with on every political issue there is.
Yes, and I think that's the whole extraordinary thing about, as an Episcopalian, when we pass the peace, I mean, that's the whole extraordinary thing. When you pass the peace, you're passing the peace to someone that you may not be one of your kind of people. But the point is that skin means something. I mean, that's what happened to me. I went through a divorce, and as it so happens in the church fired me. You know, because that's what the church does when you're down.
Okay.
They tell you how down you really are.
Okay.
You thought you were down before? Wait till we give you the good news.
All right.
And I remembered, I did the whole self-reliance thing, you know. I was angry at everybody. I don't know, it doesn't matter. God, I mean, nobody's going to mess with me. And, you know, I just hold myself up, and I had enough beer and ice cream to tide me over for a long time. And there were 4 people that I wouldn't have been friends with, people that I wouldn't have chosen, and they were different from me, who came to my house one day and said, we heard you're going down, we want to go down with you. And they literally were Jesus and skin to me, and to remind me I can't do this.
Well, you've had a unique opportunity now in the traveling that you do to speak to a lot of different audiences. I'm wondering, I'm sure you get many different viewpoints on community, but maybe you could share a couple of them with us that really speak to you in a profound way. And then community can be so many different things to so many different people, as we know. I mean, we can find it within a ministry, within a church, or within the church as a whole, or with a group of friends. I mean, are there any in particular that really come to mind when on your travels and so forth?
Well, the biggest one is you know, the story we all know about 9/11, because I work in New York, and so I have many friends who were there at the time it happened. And what they say about, because it didn't matter to talk about what difference there were with us.
Right.
We automatically were involved in rebuilding and healing. So that's the extraordinary thing about a catastrophe that allows us to put aside those differences. And the second thing I'm finding with groups now is, and these are not necessarily groups who are in churches, but they're kind of spin-offs from churches, very much in the model of a 12-step group. I see a lot of these in places I go, where people are saying, you know, I can't live this way anymore, I need to get with other people. And the first thing they've decided to do is, how can I quit labeling people? Okay. And I mean, I think, you know, that the world we live in now, because the fear, you know, the whole thing about Iraq, I mean, immediately we were suspicious of people because they're different. And so the trouble is, as soon as you label someone, you dismiss them.
Right.
And these groups that I'm familiar with as they travel is talking about how can we take the labels down, get rid of the labels.
What could we do to transform the church, if you will, into a place that could respond more authentically in that post 9/11 way to a more ordinary disaster like a divorce?
That's a really good question.
That's a great,
Yeah.
That's a great question. Yeah, because my experience is, you know, I wish they'd been there for me. And yet, you know, that's a cop-out, because the truth is there were 4 people there. And in fact, those 4 people were the church. And maybe the powers that be didn't respond like I wanted to, but the real church did. Those 4, they were Jesus in skin. So I can't hide behind that. But what I do know is this: as much as I am angry at the bureaucracy and powers that be that doesn't do that, I still have the opportunity, in fact, the responsibility, to make it happen in my life.
We're so glad you joined us, Terry. Wish we had much more time, I know. Thank you for being here
Thanks.
today.
It was great to
Thank
meet you
you.
guys.